Jeremy here from sportsmarketingmachine.com. Super special episode for you today. The great Katie Woods from the Wichita, Kansas Sports Commission and the tournament director of the NBC World Series joins me today. Katie shares insights about promoting your brand identity, what makes you special, how you can leverage that to be able to really impact the community and sell more tickets. Number two, how Katie and her team used visual marketing to increase awareness, and the visual marketing was at the ballpark that folks could see and take pictures of. And number three, how learning to listen provides you so much insight to what, in her case, the NBC World Series means to her community and what it means to a lot of folks who came out. So let's get right to it. Here we go. Welcome to the Sports Marketing Machine podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Neisser. Today, super special episode. We have the great Katie Woods from the Wichita Sports Commission joining me today. Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you. Wichita Sports Commission, you had the NBC World Series just wrapped up, so we'll dig into that. But before we get into sports and what you've been doing on the marketing side, let's talk a little bit about your background, how you got to Wichita in the first place, and then what you've been doing working in sports over the years.
Yeah, I kind of accidentally got into sports. So my degree is public relations and journalism from Cal State Northridge. And then I interned for the Astros in their community relations department. And so that was my kind of first foray into sports on the pro side. And then interned for the Frisco Rough Riders. And then my whole career up until now has been minor league baseball. So I was with the Everett Aqua Sox in the Northwest League for 7 years, which is how you and I originally got connected. Mm-hmm. And then the Lancaster Jethawks in the California League had a stop outside of baseball and marketing for a little bit, back in baseball, and then I moved to Wichita to work for the Wind Surge, so for the AA affiliate here, and then ended up with the Sports Commission.
Yeah, you've traveled a little bit, been there, seen it, done it, and your experience not only is just professional sports, but the outside perspective, having worked outside of sports, you gain a deeper understanding and appreciation for a lot of things that you did in sports and have a different perspective. So all that's good stuff. So you opened the ballpark in Wichita. What was that like?
Yeah, it was really neat. You know, the ballpark was supposed to open for 2020 and then obviously didn't. And so to be a part of that opening, I think we got the go-ahead to go to almost full capacity like 2 weeks before the event. So Wichita State had their baseball game there, was the first event, and we had a little over, I think, 7,000 people. You know, coming right out of COVID to have an event that big and to really kind of see people get to see the ballpark they've been waiting for come to life was really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's for sure. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the NBC World Series, your marketing around it. You and I talked offline. Successful, a total wonderful tournament event. But for folks who don't know, the NBC World Series, what is it? NBC is not the television network, right?
It is not. It's the National Baseball Congress, which started in 1935 in Wichita, Kansas. And it's actually a really cool story. If you have a chance to dig into Hap Dumont at all, Hap Dumont was a sporting goods sales guy and also a journalist and really wanted to put together this national tournament. And so convinced Wichita to build what later became known as Lawrence Dumont Stadium for the NBC World Series, and paid Satchel Paige $1,000 to bring his barnstorming team down to the first NBC. And that's like $20,000 in today's money. And the kind of story is he didn't have the money, but he thought this is going to be what's going to bring everybody here. This is going to be the marketing ploy. And it worked. And that was just a huge success of a tournament. And then we're going into next year being the 90th NBC World Series, all here in Wichita.
That's fantastic. And the NBC World Series is not professional players. It's college baseball. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so it's summer collegiate. It's kind of gone through a couple different iterations. It was semi-pro when there were a ton of semi-pro teams, and then it moved to summer collegiate. They've also had they've had military teams, so bases bring out their teams. They've had some international teams. They had the Kansas Stars, which was a group of all-stars from the major league or former major leaguers like Roger Clemens came and played. So it's kind of had always a little bit of a twist, but summer collegiate baseball is the main focus.
And the NBC World Series has also have had a tradition of kind of being unique, almost a trendsetter before the Savannah Bananas, right?
Oh yeah, they had all sorts of things like the pitch clock that Major League Baseball just implemented this year. Was in the 1960s. Was in the NBC World Series. We have red, white, and blue bases, haptic, glow-in-the-dark baseball. You know, there's kind of always been these twists or these kind of like, let's try it and see. So a lot of that minor league baseball mentality or the Savannah Bananas mentality kind of before that was a thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Bob from Salina was the one that wrote in. Is that, did I read that right?
Yeah, it's great because we have all these books. I should have brought it, but, you know, we have these huge books that they used to do every year. And it was everything from the box scores for every single game from the previous year's tournament to articles about, you know, different players, different things. And so they did articles about the pitch clock. And then the next year they had letters to the editor. And one of them was from Bob from Salina talking about how great the pitch clock was and how it was going to revolutionize baseball because they really needed a kick. And this was in the 1960s. So it's pretty cool.
Well, go figure. Bob from Salina would be really proud right now. Good stuff. Well, all that being said, so it's great traditions, a lot of history. You're coming in as a brand new marketing director, and you say, okay, well, I've got to start planning for the NBC World Series. Where do you start? Where did you start?
You know, it was interesting because it's kind of gone through, like I said, a bunch of different iterations. You're talking about 89 years of history. There's almost 900 major leaguers that have played in the National Baseball Congress, so there's this great history. But a lot of what people knew it for was Lawrence Dumont Stadium, which is a stadium that was torn down to build Riverfront Stadium for the wind surge. So people knew it for that. They knew it for baseball around the clock, where they used to play 17 games in 56 hours.
Wow!
And so that was stopped a few years ago, too. And so people know it for these things, but those don't exist anymore. But you do have 90 years of history to pull from. And so a lot of when I first got here was kind of trying to wrap my arms around all of that and go, how do you take 90 years of history and extract those important pieces for people and those traditions to kind of rebuild and give an elevator pitch to kind of what our history is.
So how did you do it? What did you do? Was there specific things that you had themes for? Or what did you do as you started to build kind of the brand identity, as you start to put some momentum and some thought behind the planning? What were some of the things that you did?
I mean, one of the things was to be able to really kind of capitalize on the history and not suddenly turn us into something different, right? So there's that, we can go this total opposite direction and go forward and then skip that 90 years of history. And you don't want to do that, but you also don't want to do the same things we were doing 70 years ago or 80 years ago. And so we rebranded right off the bat. So we put together a new logo. They've been using the same one, I think, for 15 years or so. That had kind of a retro feel to it, but it wasn't old and stale. So we worked with Town Hall Brands, and they put that together for us. And so that was our first thing right off the bat. We also moved it to Wichita State University because it had been kind of a little bit all over, like multiple facilities the last few years since it was no longer at Lawrence Dumont. So having one facility, so being like, this is what we look like, this is where we are, you know, this is when you can find us, just to kind of solidify that again because it had so many pieces. Mm-hmm. And then it was, all right, what are those history stories? You know, the pitch clock is one of them, glow ball's another. They, on their on their scoreboard at Lawrence Dumont Stadium, they had Gertie the Goose. So they had a goose that every time the visiting team didn't score, instead of a 0, it would lay an egg. And so, you know, we did kind of features on Gertie the Goose. We did features on the pitch clock, and you had all these people on social media commenting like, oh, I remember that, and this is, you know, tagging people, telling those stories. So you start to kind of bring that nostalgia out in people and go, okay, this is stuff that resonates with them. This is stuff that feels familiar, but we're kind of elevating it and bringing it to a new audience too.
That is fantastic, and that's a great lesson. If you're a new marketing director and you just join a hockey team, a basketball team, a NBA G League, or a minor league baseball team, like understanding the history before you start running ads, before you start doing anything, taking time to understand what the team actually means and what it stands for and some of the rich history, that kind of gives you a running start into your planning, right?
Yeah, and what are those things that kind of make you stand out or unique or special? We would do that. Okay, why do people come to games? And I remember doing this with the Jethawks, and it was, one of them was we would do the 2-foot-long hot dog, right? So we have a 2-foot-long hot dog. Then people also come because it's affordable compared to driving down into LA and going to a Dodgers game. It was like, okay, so it's affordable, it's family, there's these fun, unique things. Okay, so that's what we're pitching. That's what we're showing people. Because if you just are going, okay, we're baseball. And I remember the first time I started to get involved with our marketing with the Aqua Sox, we'd been using an agency, and they sent the ads, and they were using these generic baseball photos. It was literally like a ball on grass. And I was like, that doesn't tell me anything. Yeah, is that Little League? Is that T-ball? Is that, why am I going to that? And so I think figuring out what it is that makes your stadium or your team special, and it might be something like, I think about the, it's the ostrich peanut vendor that they had.
Reading Phillies.
The Reading Phillies. And that was one that I think just kind of like naturally had come, right? They had their peanut vendor dressed up like that. And so then it became this big thing, and then they were doing like giveaways and bobbleheads and all this kind of stuff. And so to go, that might not work anywhere else. But with that audience, it resonated, and they leaned into it. And that's what makes difference, in your marketing, is what's going to resonate with your audience. Not just anybody's audience, but your audience.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of ballparks across the country, specifically in minor league baseball, it's a lot of food things. So Rochester has the garbage plate. Stockton Ports have the fried asparagus during the games. And I'm sure there's hundreds of more across the country. But, yeah, those are the things. Hey, these are the things that stand out, that people remember. Your 2-foot hot dog, 2-foot long hot dog. Absolutely. Yep. Thinking about what makes you special and really kind of putting some emphasis behind that. So as you started to kind of work through that, you're posting on social media, as far as like actually starting to promote it, trying to get some ticket sales, when was the timing of things, and how did you take what you make special and put it into actual actionable buy tickets now type things? I'm all about data, and sometimes this is the part that guys like me, we forget about.
Yeah, well, and it's so hard because, for us it was a learning year too, because there hadn't really been this approach, at least for the last, 5 years maybe. And so to kind of break it down to what is our audience, who is it, and it could be baseball fans, but it also, there's a national audience. Like we bring teams from Seattle and Santa Barbara to come out to Wichita, so there's a national audience for it too. So we did, social, we did traditional, because traditional marketing still works in Wichita. That still definitely has a place here. But then we also did some marketing at the local Quick Trip, so the convenience store. And this was new for me coming from the West Coast. For me, a convenience store or gas station has always been like, if you're going on a road trip, you stop and get snacks, but otherwise you're just getting gas and you go. And in Wichita, people will be like, hey, I'm running a Quick Trip. You want anything? And I'm like, I don't even know what the options are. And they're like, oh, well, I'm going to get some lunch. And I'm like, you're going to get lunch from Quick Trip?
The convenience store?
But everybody, and it's, that's where I get my coffee. That's where I get my drinks. That's where I go get, they have tons of prepackaged food that's great quality. And so that's like a part of it. I call it like the convenience store culture of the Midwest. And so we started working with them because they also, there's a festival in town called Riverfest. They sell the buttons, which are entry passes to Riverfest at Quick Trip. So we approached Quick Trip and said, hey, what do you think about selling tickets for NBC? And so we ended up having countertop space there that had our branding. And one of the lines we really kind of went with was the idea that this is Wichita's summer tradition since 1935. For 89 years, this is what you do in Wichita in the summers. You go to the NBC World Series, and people could buy $5 tickets at Quick Trip. And instead of them being just pieces of paper, just kind of something cheap, we did kind of commemorative, retro-looking tickets, so that way there was something that was a takeaway. And so we did that there because it really resonated with our community. That's something that probably would have never worked in Lancaster or Everett, or I wouldn't have even thought of, but probably wouldn't have been the fit. And here, it made so much sense for us to partner with them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. As you started to take a look at your audiences and your community, it's different in California and it's different in Washington than it is in Wichita. How did you, initially, was this one of those things where you're like, hey, I'm going to give us a try, or where everyone was like, hey, gung-ho, this is it, this is going to help us move some ticket sales?
It was one of those that once we started talking to people about it, you had a lot of people who were like, oh, yeah, because they are trained to buy their buttons for Riverfest there. They know that's where you can buy event tickets. But even when I was talking to Quick Trip, my understanding is they really only do that in the Wichita market, that they have stores in Kansas City and things like that where this is not the same. But in Wichita, it's part of how people are used to buying their tickets or for an event. And so it just made a lot of sense as we talked to people, like, oh, that's great. And I heard so many people who maybe didn't buy tickets there, members of our advisory board, who were like, oh, I saw it at Quick Trip. Oh, I saw the signage at Quick Trip. And so it worked both as a ticket sales location for us, but just as marketing. It was like a billboard. Every time somebody went to go get their breakfast pizza or their, lunch hot dog or whatever, we were right there at the counter.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that, if you're not in that community, maybe an ad agency might come to you and say, hey, we're going to run Facebook ads, we're going to run XYZ ads, this is how you're going to spend your money. But knowing your community and understanding your audience, of course it resonated because you're elbow deep in understanding what that's all about. But you're right, in some communities, that wouldn't work. Absolutely would not work.
And I think that's been one of the biggest things, as I've, like you said, kind of traveled between teams and different communities is, one, I learned something everywhere that I can take somewhere else. But then I also really have learned to listen. You just go in and you're like, okay, tell me about it, right? Like, what makes the NBC special? And I'll have people who are in their 70s or 80s telling me about, well, I remember when I used to come to the NBC as a kid with my grandparents, and I would ride my bike, and there used to be trains in the outfield, like there's a train track right past the outfield, and we would sit on top of the trains and watch games. You have other people who talk about, it's just amazing. Like, other people talk about, oh, so I used to be a bat boy, and I was a bat boy when Roger Clemens was here, or there's just kind of these layers of stories. And so you start to pick out those pieces of like, okay, that's what you still remember. That's what's still important. It's that multi-generational. It's that family. It's those unique things that are only in Wichita. And then you start to kind of like craft that picture of who we are and how we kind of push that forward.
Yeah, that's fantastic. As far as ticket sales numbers go, do you feel like, it sounds like from an advertising perspective, 100% great awareness about the convenience store marketing that you did, but as far as ticket sales, did it do pretty well?
Yeah, we did really well with our Quick Trip tickets, but it was the first time we'd done it. So it was, now we have like this baseline, and then we know, but it was great too because they also were able to break down for us how many were sold by week and then how many were sold by store. So we were able to see kind of what areas, we had more people buying and when people were buying. And so that helps us with both that marketing for next year, but then just our general marketing for next year too.
Yeah. So your other marketing, did you do billboards? Did you run digital? What did it all look like? Yeah.
So we did billboards, TV, radio. We did some social media because obviously that's what you do now.
Yep.
And broken down and focused a little bit more. And then we worked with some local influencers too. There's a couple here. There's one Wichita mom who really is like family and has been really big on news. Just kind of when you're like, what do I do with my family? That's where you go. And then Wichita Life is another one we worked with. And he's kind of evolved from doing mostly social media kind of events that are happening in the last few years. Now he does a couple times a week email marketing. That's everything happening in Wichita. Like, he'll do anything from, like, here's the events to here's a deep dive into what's happening with, like, electricity in Wichita. Or here's some zoning things that are happening. In these kind of bite-sized for everyone in the community pieces where it's not just, oh, I'm going to go see what's happening this weekend, but I'm going to learn something about my community. And so we did some paid marketing with him, but then he also, on his own, did like a deep dive into the NBC and the history of HAP and Satchel Paige and, kind of how special it is for Wichita. And so that was really cool to find those people who are making a difference in the community and getting the word out in different ways.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's just talk really quick about the influencer. It was more of an awareness play, or were you trying to get ticket sales through them? And if so, how did you track it?
So we did more kind of general awareness, but we did a few kind of focused things. So for Wichita Moms, for example, we partner with Evergy, and they do free tickets for any kid that's wearing a jersey. So if your kids play Little League and they show up wearing their Little League jersey, they get in free any day of the NBC. So with her, that was really one of the focuses for the families was that specifically. Whereas for Wichita Life, it was more that general awareness because you have so many people who are probably anyone over 30 in Wichita knows about the NBC. and that 30 to 40 crowd remembers a lot of coming as like teenagers and that sort of thing. But that younger crowd, it's a new event to them. So a lot of it was how do we just kind of spread the word and get people to know it's festival, your ticket's good for all day long, that there's also activities and music and, you know, all these other things happening, and the caliber of baseball too.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were very, very strategic on how you use your influencers, what you did on your billboards, and knowing, hey, the convenience store audience is this type of specific person. We're going to target to this specific person, and then the families, we're talking more about family-oriented things. So you were almost like, instead of like a spray and pray, you were almost like sniper rifle with specific things here. So that's awesome to be able to hear how you put together your marketing planning. And am I reading it right? More sniper rifle?
Yeah, I think there was that general, like, you know, kind of here's the awareness. But one of, I think, the things that made a big difference for us too is that people want those unique stories, right? Those like unique snippets pulled out for them. And so we had a member of our advisory board who now doesn't work in TV but had before. And so she helped us kind of go, okay, what are like 4 interesting stories about what's happening in the tournament? And there was a player from one team who is legally deaf, who's a pitcher for one of the teams, and so, you know, she kind of had a pitch about him. We talked about how we were doing a circus night, and that was part of when HAP had started the tournament. It was because you couldn't have circuses on Sundays, but you could have baseball with entertainment. And so she had a little pitch on that, and so she kind of would send out to all the stations, hey, here's 4 or 5 interesting stories, and we had people really pick that up because we were doing a lot of the work for them instead of, hey, here's everything about the NBC World Series, and people go, that's too much.
It's too much. Yep.
Too long, didn't read, here's the bullet points, and people go, well, that's really interesting. And then they would come out and cover that one piece, and we were able to spread the word about the NBC in a much more targeted way, like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So now the event's behind you. Looking back, how were ticket sales? Did you break records? Did you have a successful? How would you kind of, if you were to grade it, A through E, A being X, like I don't know, and B and so forth? Like, how would you grade the NBC this year?
You know, I think for what we wanted to do for this year, I think it was great, and I think it was an A. As far as ticket sales, I think we're probably like a B, like where we wanted to be. But it was, for this year, a lot of that, like, reintroducing the whole tournament and laying that groundwork and showing people this is what we want it to be. Because it's been, in the last few years, just baseball. You know, it's just baseball. And if you know that there's going to be great talent there. You know, we've got a lot of NCAA Division I guys, Division II guys, a lot of really interesting prospects. But if you don't know, you're like, well, it's just baseball. That's not for me. And so being able to reinvent that, show people. We had Maybelle Blair, who played in the original League of Their Own league. She came out to the NBC this year for our Women in Baseball night, and so we were able to do things for the general fan, but then also do like a Women in Leadership and Business night to go along with that, and really had people going, I had no idea. I've never been to an NBC game before, and this is amazing. So I think it really was exactly what we needed to kind of like catapult us as we go into the 90th year next year.
And so you had Maybelle, and then you also had Rosie the Riveter as well?
Yeah, so Maybelle Blair is 96, and so she came out, and we also had her on Aviation Night. So she was in the League of Their Own league, you know, in the AAG PBL, but she also, after that, went on to go work at Northrop Grumman and was one of the first women in leadership there. Wow. And so we had Women in Baseball and Aviation Night together, and locally, we have Connie Palacios, who's 98 years old, and she's one of the original Rosie the Riveters she was for Boeing here in Wichita, and so she came dressed as Rosie. So you had her, and she's, you know, not the tallest, you know, and so you had her at 98 dressed like that, and you had Maybelle, and if you've ever seen her, she has this huge white hair and these big sunglasses and these huge personalities, and you just have the two of them together, and it was just phenomenal. I mean, just phenomenal. Both of them are just such powerhouses, and so it was really kind of interesting special to hear them both talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't know who Rosie is, just Google Rosie the Riveter. And as soon as you see the image, you're going to go, oh, I knew who that is. But for those who don't know, just Google it. It'll be fine. And Maybelle out there, it looked like she was having a blast. Everyone had a blast. But you had something for every audience. And I think that's a huge lesson to take away here. Working in minor league sports, you have 70 games, 72 games, even 80 in some cases. So you have a lot of games, a lot of promotions, a lot of different different things. You essentially did a lot of what you did in minor league baseball, taking promotions and different things for different audiences and brought it to Wichita for the NBC World Series. And your staff, it's just you and like how many other people? Do you have an army of people, or how many people's on your staff?
No army. So yeah, we run kind of the community events, community sporting events in Wichita. So I'm the only person dedicated to the NBC, and then I also help out with our other events. So we have a staff of 4 and then some interns, but we have an awesome advisory board, and that's really where we get a lot of that specialized skill. You know, we have someone on our advisory board who volunteers to oversee our volunteers, and so she helps coordinate all of that. We have this person, like I was telling you about, who helped do all of our kind of some of our social media, but also our targeted media. And so being able to kind of call in those resources and go, hey, I don't need you to be full-time, but you have this skill set and you could help make this awesome, that really made a difference for us.
Yeah, and I think that's another huge lesson, specifically in minor league sports, is oftentimes as marketing directors think, everything's on our shoulders. We carry the entire load, but there's so many people on your staff, season ticket holders, maybe owners or partners or what have you, that want to share their input, that have feedback, have thoughts, and ultimately everyone's contributing rather than being just on one person's shoulders. And sure, you made a lot of the calls and say, hey, no, we're going to do this because of why, but oftentimes we forget that there's people there that want to help for sure, and you want to delegate and give it to them and allow them to help, right?
Yeah, because people want to show you their skill set. You know what I mean? Like, people are so proud of what they can bring to it, and if you can recognize that and almost project manage it and just be like, you do this awesome thing. You know, I have a friend who, for our marketing awards in town, she does not by trade a florist, but she did these beautiful flower arrangements. And I said, hey, would you be willing to do that for our Women in Baseball night? And she was like, absolutely, that'd be awesome. She's like, I love to do it, and I never get a chance to do it. And so she did these beautiful arrangements for the cost of Trader Joe's flowers for us, you know, and it was just, it made such a difference for the event. But you just got to ask, right, and put yourself out there and try to kind of find those people with skills that want to be a part of something great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other lesson here, too, is all that you did, you were planning, you were talking, you were organizing, but it wasn't like, no, we're absolutely doing this. You were allowed people to kind of share feedback and inside information. And sure, some things probably work better than others, but it was just giving the opportunity for everyone to understand the why and everyone to be involved. And sometimes us marketing folks forget to share the why.
Yeah, and I think it can be kind of a balance where you're like, you don't want to dilute it too much, right? You don't want to have too many people involved, and you end up with kind of that, that image where it's like when it's by committee, and it's just like this, we're drawing a horse by committee, and it just like looks crazy because everybody was involved. You need to pick something and go, but you need to get all of that and get that buy-in from all those people, and then you kind of go, okay, you know what? Like ostrich peanut butter, that's our thing, and we're going. Because you're going to have some people who are going to be like, I don't know, that seems kind of, and it's like, no, that's, I believe, I've got these other people that believe, let's go all in on this. But yeah, with the buy-in of a community that's going to make it happen for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I tend to lean a lot towards the data side of things, making data and looking at it and using data to make driven decisions. But when you have the rich history that you have, the NBC World Series, oftentimes data is just simply not available, and it's evolved so much that the data almost becomes obsolete to a point. So taking 2 steps back and actually creating the strategy around the rich history and tradition and focusing on specifically what makes you special, that almost is more valuable than using data to make your decisions.
Well, I think part of it is you've got to figure out what you're selling, right? And so if you just have this data and you're like, okay, I know where my audience is, I know who the audience is, and I know how to get to them. Okay, then what are you telling them, right? And so if all you're saying to them is like, we have baseball. All right, you know what I mean?
That's
like,
great.
Like, awesome. But if you're able to pull at heartstrings, if you're able to really show people something unique they've never seen before, and if you're able to understand that audience, then the data helps you get there and be really efficient about it. But if all you have is, I have an audience, but you don't know what to do with them, or you don't know who you are, then you're not going to get the ROI one way or the other.
Yeah, agreed. So now looking back, so you've graded it, what are some things, just a couple, you don't have to go too far in depth, but what are some things you would look back and say, hey, if I would do this a little bit differently, or hey, we're going to do that again because we know 100% that worked. I know the convenience store marketing to sell tickets, that absolutely worked. What are some other things that worked, and what were some things you looked at and said, you know what, if we just made a few more tweaks on this one, this would do pretty well?
One of the things that I thought worked is people really want that visual, right? Whether it's going to be, like, what am I taking a picture of to put on Instagram or share with my family that I was there? And what makes it different than any other ballpark? So we partnered with someone locally who does the big light-up letters. So we worked with Alphalit, and they did a big, the NBC World Series, I think it was like 9 feet tall, and was lit up for the whole tournament. And so many people were taking pictures. It was just this great focal point. We did some signage around that was new, that was just some baseball quotes, like the love is great, but baseball's pretty good too, like Yogi Berra, those types of things. And then you saw that popping up, right? So you kind of created that feel for people when they came in. So I think that really worked. I think one thing I learned was I'm used to minor league baseball, and it's one game a night. So if you've got 5,000 people, they're all there at one time. We play 35 games in 10 days. So we have 4 games a day most of the time. So if I had 5,000 people in the ballpark, it might be 500 people for one game and 2,000 for another game. And, there's this flow, this ebb and flow to it. And so it needed to be different. It couldn't just be all of our stuff is this game is where everything is. If you're a Kansas Cannon fan and you're coming to the 3 o'clock game, you're only coming to the 3 o'clock game, but that's your NBC experience. So we did some stuff. We did a lot of giving out NBC koozies, just randomly, going through stands and giving out koozies. We got baseball cards from a local card shop, and we're giving those out to kids throughout. We did a friendship bracelet making station for a couple games. Just different things where there was something for everybody whenever you were there. And I think that's something we're really going to amplify versus just you're here for a giveaway and fireworks. And that's it, and that's for the primetime game.
35 games in 10 days. Minor League Baseball short season. I think they play 35, 40 games, somewhere around there.
We were 38 when I was with the Aqua Sox.
Over 3 months. And you did that in 10 days.
Yep.
Yeah. So you essentially did marketing, planning, implementation, budget, audience, all of the things that minor league sports teams would do, but you had 35 games in 10 days, and you probably didn't sleep.
Not a whole lot, and it was my first time really doing more on the baseball side too. So, we recruit the teams from across the country. Some of them qualify from their leagues or from tournaments, but, it was like umpire scheduling, or we had the lights, one of the light banks went out in the middle of a game, and so then I'm down on the field with the umpires and the managers figuring out what are we going to do next. And so I kind of said my brain was always shifting gears. It was here's a marketing, here's a ticketing, here's a mascot has a problem, here's a baseball on the field. But it was really kind of great because you get that perspective too. And so just taking all that information from everybody, what everybody's looking for, and how do you make those players have a great experience so they're talking about it when they go back home, all that as well.
Yeah, all of it is great. It's such a wonderful lesson about taking 2 steps back and understanding what makes you special and how do you continue to build upon it and market and promote what makes you special. How do you get people to your games, and being creative with some different things. I mean, the TV, the outreach to the TV stations is fantastic. Bringing in old girls, professional baseball players, and doing some things with them, and community nights, and just all the different things that you did. When you stack it all together, you look back and you say, boy, that was a lot of work, but we had a tremendously successful tournament because so many people were involved to make it super special. So kudos to you and the team for having such a wonderful, wonderful event. I'm looking forward to it, hopefully eventually coming up and checking out a game maybe next year. But that is awesome. Great for you and great for the staff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you got it. Well, Katie, appreciate it. If anyone has any questions and pick your brain about some of the things that you did, what's the easiest or best way to get a hold of you?
Probably Katie at wichitasports.com is my email is the best way, or just look us up, nbcbaseball.com.
Perfect. Well, Katie, appreciate your time, appreciate the insight and the info. Wonderful lesson for new marketing directors and a reminder for marketing directors who've been around it. Oftentimes, data is important, but taking 2 steps back and thinking through what makes you special, I think that's such a great reminder. All righty.